Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. It's Tuesday, which means we're diving into another Contradictions episode, where we tackle these seemingly contradictory details in Scripture. I'm Lance Smith, and today we're looking at an age-old question that keeps coming up. Who was Jesus' paternal grandfather? Was it Jacob, as Matthew's Gospel suggests, or Heli, as Luke presents? Is it possible both genealogies are true, or is there a deeper story that speaks to the Gospel's unique cultural and theological perspectives? So what's going on with these genealogies? Why would the Gospel writers present such different family trees? Today we'll examine various explanations, from ancient customs like Levirate marriage to historical differences in audiences, uncovering what these genealogies tell us about Jesus' identity and mission. The Skeptic's Annotated Bible lists two verses, one in Matthew that show Jacob as the grandfather of Jesus, and one in Luke that shows Heli as the grandfather of Jesus. Let's explore each using the New Living Translation. Matthew 1:16. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Luke 3:23. Jesus was about 30 years old when he began his public ministry. Jesus was known as the son of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Heli. All right, let's start with the critical scholarly perspective, and this is focusing on two prominent figures from the Jesus Seminar, a group of 200 biblical scholars widely criticized for its unconventional methods and focus. For context, the Jesus Seminar was formed partly as a response to literalist interpretations of the Bible, meeting biannually to examine gospel text and sayings. However, scholars have often criticized the group for heavily relying on the criterion of dissimilarity, a method that only considered a saying authentic if it differed from established Jewish or early Christian beliefs. Additionally, the Jesus Seminar's voting process contributed to its disrepute. Scholars cast votes using colored beads to rate the authenticity of sayings, red and pink for higher authenticity, gray and black for theological bias, and approach criticized for lacking nuance. Critics have also pointed out that the seminar's selective focus on certain sources, like the Q source and the Gospel of Thomas, while largely overlooking others, such as the Gospel of the Hebrews. This discredited Jesus Seminar fostered public attention on modern critical scholars like the late Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan, both of whom suggest in their 2009 book, The First Christmas, that both genealogies, the one in Matthew and the one in Luke, may be later inventions. They argue these genealogies were created to establish Jesus' messianic credentials in accordance with Jewish expectations. Just a quick refresher here. Skeptics and atheists point to these discrepancies as proof the Bible is not reliable. And again, the most common and tiresome assumption is to assert the genealogies were compiled after the destruction of the Jewish temple in AD 70. This assertion is extremely hard to follow, as we covered last week. There are so many major significant events in the AD 60s that were not detailed in Luke or Acts, which shows the compilation of these books being in the AD 50s. Again, when someone makes an assertion, such as the genealogies were compiled after the destruction of the temple, they bear the burden of proof of their assertion, not you, to prove the claim false. Quite simply, the data do not support the assertion of a later genealogy. It does support the earlier dating of these books of the Bible. And again, it's helpful to understand the solid ground on which the dating of the biblical Gospels is in order to set us to move forward. Last week, we covered the specifics on the different genealogies. The first is the different lineages. Matthew follows Joseph's line through Solomon, while Luke follows Mary's line through Nathan. Both are sons of David, fulfilling the messianic prophecy. The second is the legal versus biological. Matthew may present the legal royal lineage, while Luke presents the biological lineage through Mary. And the third is the adoption theory. Some scholars suggest Joseph was the son-in-law of Heli, Mary's father, explaining why Luke lists Heli as Joseph's father, or by understanding one as a biological father and the other as a legal father. Now, let's delve deeper into these explanations and explore some additional 5 perspectives that scholars have proposed to reconcile this apparent discrepancy. The first is the Levirate marriage theory. Some scholars propose that the difference in Joseph's father could be explained by the practice of Levirate marriage, a custom described in Deuteronomy 25, 5-6. In this scenario, Jacob and Heli could have been brothers. If one died without a son, the other would marry his widow, and their first son would be considered the legal heir of the deceased brother. This theory suggests that Joseph could have been the biological son of one brother, but the legal son of the other. There is a link in the show notes for the article Levirate Marriage in Halatzah that provides further detail. The second perspective is the maternal-grandfather theory. Another perspective posits that while Matthew's genealogy traces Joseph's paternal line, Luke's genealogy might be presenting Mary's lineage, with Joseph mentioned as the son-in-law of Heli. This theory aligns with the Jewish custom of tracing lineage through the father's line, explaining why Mary isn't explicitly mentioned in Luke's genealogy. Now, this is a common perspective in many biblical commentaries. The third perspective is textual analysis. Some scholars have conducted detailed textual analysis of the original Greek text. They argue that the grammatical structure in Luke's genealogy could be interpreted differently, potentially resolving the apparent contradiction. This approach highlights the importance of understanding the nuances of the original languages in biblical interpretation. Honestly, I can't find a lot of detail here, so this is still a bit of a fringe argument to me. The fourth perspective is theological implications. Beyond the historical and textual explanations, it's worth considering the theological implications of these genealogies. Both accounts, regardless of their differences, and who may be Jesus' paternal grandfather, affirm Jesus' connection to the Davidic line, fulfilling Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah. The shared purpose underscores the theological unity of the Gospels despite their apparent contradictions and discrepancies. The fifth perspective is harmonization attempts. Throughout church history, various attempts have been made to harmonize these genealogies. From early church fathers like Julius Africanus to modern scholars, many have proposed theories to reconcile the differences. While no single explanation has gained universal acceptance, these attempts demonstrate the ongoing effort to understand and interpret Scripture faithfully. This is important because many atheists and skeptics point to these discrepancies as some sort of new knowledge. Biblical scholars have been wrestling and answering these questions since 160 AD to the present. Each of these explanations and perspectives brings a unique lens to understand Jesus' identity and mission, showing how the gospel writers tailored these genealogies for their audiences. In conclusion, while the apparent discrepancy in Jesus' paternal grandfather between Matthew and Luke has been a point of contention, it's important to approach this issue with an understanding of the cultural, historical, and theological context of the Gospels. The various explanations and perspectives offered by scholars over the centuries demonstrate the complexity of biblical interpretation and the importance of careful, nuanced study. It's the nuance that skeptics and atheists so often miss. Remember, these genealogies serve a greater purpose than mere historical record-keeping. They establish Jesus' credentials as the Messiah and demonstrate his connections to both the royal line of David and the broader human family. As we grapple with these apparent contradictions, we're invited into a deeper engagement with Scripture, challenging us to think critically and faithfully about the text. So as you think about this discussion, remember that understanding the Bible often involves seeing how different accounts come together to reveal a unified message. Lastly, as we look further into the Skeptic's Annotated Bible, we notice that many contradictions repeat similar themes. To avoid redundancy, we may combine some of these topics in future episodes. Thanks for tuning in to this Tuesday Contradictions edition of the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. Remember to send in your questions and let's keep unraveling the fascinating complexities of Scripture together. As always, we love hearing from our listeners. We now have a Bible Difficulties and Answers Facebook page where you can interact with me and other followers of the show. You may also reach us at our website, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com, or you may reach out to me directly at our email address, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com, with any questions, comments, concerns, fits of righteous indignation, or just to say hi. I am always glad to hear from our listeners. Also, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend or two as well. And also, write a review and give it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, or any of your venues of choice. It really does help get the word out about the most amazing book ever written. Again, I'm Lance Smith. Until next time, I wish you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.